Okay, it's working. I think yes. So this is the fellowship of the link call for 17 July 2024. And we just started. We're discussing Obi-Wan as a look, which you can aspire to. And yes, that's pretty much the start of it.
I'm unconvinced it's recording because
So
Yeah, I
I
didn't
think it
see
usually
anything
has the
pop up, which
yeah.
usually happens. So who knows?
so yeah, I know it's weird. It was weird. Like the recording dialog was slightly changed. It did say all the participants will not be notified you're recording. I think because it's
Oh,
local. Yeah, but it is sharing
nice.
the tab. Yeah,
It's a new European privacy thing he's got going on
right.
that doesn't work for those of us in Southern California.
Not yet. Not yet. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to me as a like I'm gonna take the Jitsi side. It's like I mean, I am the sort of the things what your computer sees, you see is you now own a copy of a copy, right? I know that this may not be a popular take for many copyright lobbies, for example, but
I think I don't know. I think affirmative disclosure is a good thing, and I like the little red button that used to be on the screen that says,
Yeah, the
it's a good
all-seeing
reminder.
Hal eye.
So now I have to try a surreptitious recording here. Sorry, not surreptitious. I'm telling you, I'm going to record.
yeah, 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 yeah. It is all above board. But true, I mean, I do have the icon that says recording, so you could find this out. Yeah, maybe the best
No,
way is to for me to share my screen. Oh no, I can't because Wayland is broken today. But then you will see the icon, I guess.
I started recording too, and I
Well,
guess
I like your idea of if you see it and your computer sees it, then you could have potentially have a copy of it,
Mhm.
because essentially that takes the hey, I saw this thing, and instead of needing to rely on your potentially faulty memory, you could revert back to that thing you actually saw.
Completely, yeah. I guess Microsoft got in trouble, like pursuing that that line of thinking, but I don't think it has legs. I agree.
Yeah. Well, it also opens up the hey, I saw a movie that I licensed myself one ticket at the movie theater for, and so the question is, what do you do with that thing you saw after? And that's where the stickier questions of ownership happen, because
Yeah,
just because I saw Top Gun doesn't mean I own it for reviewing or sharing it with friends and family at every single moment. Or if it did, like, we would have to reframe how that IP capitalism thing works.
yeah, yeah. Which we will get to in a moment. Yes, but fair. I mean, I guess I am. I of course I see those shortcomings, and you're spot on. I will think that we are closer to making that argument now than ever before, considering how ubiquitous the technology is for like recording and sharing, and also the whole AI debate on copyright as it interacts with like training, you know. So, so if not, I mean, we need to see, like I discussed with Peter, I think a few meetings back, but how that question gets settled. But it will be sort of like weird to say like, well, if you are very, very large, you can ignore copyright, but if you go down to the individual level, no, you have to stick to it. It's like that may be the outcome actually, unfortunately, but it does seem like we could do better than that. Um, but you, Chris, you are closer to the entertainment movie industry than me for sure. So, so I wonder, like, how you feel about that question about the the copyright as it interacts with say, like, yes, the movie example.
Well, that's a tough thing, because there's the how I deal with it on the personal level, But I also, at that same thing, I have access to an awful lot more of material because of where I live and the people I know and how I interact than the average person. You know, if there's some classic movie I really need to see in a theater somewhere, I have access to go find it and get it, and 5 theaters I could call or private screening rooms, and I can go do it. Now, it's a little bit of work to do that, but not everybody, almost no one has that access. And then there's the, hey, I have clients who do this stuff and want to make money from it. Although at the same time, too, the studios are keeping more and more of that money and not actually giving it to the people who made the thing, even in radical success. So, you know, the Hollywood still is reeling from the strikes, and a lot of that work just hasn't come back at all. But the structure of it is, and I kind of almost expect to see movie theaters in the next, if things don't change in the next 4 or 5 years, movie theaters are going to start having problems and going out of business because streaming is eating all the lunch. So when you have, like, you know, Beverly Hills Cop this week came out on streaming rather than going to a theater. And it may have been better and more fun to watch it in a theater, but it didn't. It went to streaming straight away. So those staged windows don't exist. And they're not, you know, there are no VHS sales anymore. CD sale or DVD sales are ridiculously low. You know, so there aren't the 4 or 5 stages that we used to have. It's all streaming now.
Straight to streaming, yeah.
And you don't really own it. You may buy it from Google or buy it from Amazon, but really you're licensing it for the length of either your life or the life of the service, whichever is shorter.
As we've seen several times already, yeah. And then you have the pirates, you know, who like actually get the copies and may actually stand a better chance of like serving as the long-term safeguards of culture, maybe even.
Well, it's not even so there's like what has always existed as low-level piracy, but lately there are like massive scale piracy operations. There was one, I think, that just got prosecuted and shut down a few weeks ago. That was, the name of their company was something similar to Netflix, but they were charging $10 a month, and they had everything apparently. Like you take your Netflix and Amazon Prime subscription and Hulu and all the rest, combine them all together, and that's what this company was offering. And you know, but they were pirating at massive scale and looked professional doing it. So you know, it's a whole lot.
There's a weird thing that's going to happen. Movies, like finished movies as an event and as an artifact, they're gonna kind of disappear in the next 5 years or something like that, because it's got to be, because generative AI is going to catch up, and everybody can make a movie, right? So then what you want to do is have a big back catalog of things that can be mined to make movies out of, right? So there's going to be a billion versions of Star Wars and, you know, whatever, based on mining the old catalogs. And then the new stuff is going to be interactive, like virtual worlds that people are just creating on the fly, kind of. So that's going to be the new movie experience, is participating in either online or maybe we could revive theaters or something and do that in the round with a bunch of people in the same space.
Because you totally want the ability to tell your TV, I want to see Harry Potter 1 again, but I want to recast Harry Potter as a really young Mickey Rooney opposite an aged down Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah.
And, I want to see it that way instead.
I want to see a mashup of Star Wars and aliens and Harry Potter,
Right.
but I want it to be played by Betty Grable and Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable. And
Although the problem is likely that occurs is people complain now about how derivative things are. So, when you see a sci-fi movie, you're like, oh, I'm just rewatching Buck Rogers serials all over again. Like, can't Hollywood come up with something more creative? And the AI is going to be even worse and even super more derivative because of the body of work that they're drawing from.
Right. I mean, here, okay, I'm gonna take the AI advocate. I'm not always this person, but like you can imagine that what AI doesn't have when it comes to sheer originality, people may still put in uh, just by sheer the sheer audacity of the combinations that people can explore. So, for example, like the examples you came up with right off the bat of these mashups of Harry Potter and Star Wars and the rest. I mean, that's not something that a studio will usually fund or explore. I mean, and a lot of that will even infringe copyright, right? So it's like, or will be a nightmare of licensing. So maybe one door of creativity closes, or like it's not explored for now, but this new door opens. So
I totally agree. And I
Oh,
also agree with Chris. So there's going to be a bunch of the equivalent of comfort food content, which is the same recycled Hallmark movies or action adventure movies or whatever. But there are also going to be some amazing, like stunningly creative things. The person I have as a touchstone, or the group, the musical group, we saw the same thing happen with music, just not so deep. When digital audio and synthesizers, sampling, all that kind of stuff came out, everybody had access to a full orchestra. Everybody had access to it, and most people couldn't use it because getting a full orchestra to sound good is hard. But you get these that Billie Eilish and her brother are the people that like are a touchstone for me. Eilish and her brother, I forget his name, they made kind of a new sound. They made new kinds of songs, and it was because they had samplers and they had they had their bedroom. They could make music whenever they wanted to, and not pay studio fees and things like that. And so there's a bunch of crap that can happen, a lot of it, and probably the crap kind of gets a little bit better. The comfort food gets a little bit better, but there's also these singular things that just would never have happened. Owl City has got a song that is just a complete pop, bubblegum pop kind of like thing, but it's an earworm for a lot of people. And that his song would have never happened if he wasn't spending thousands of hours in his basement studio all by himself late at night.
yeah. Well, it's the same kind of thing as what can you do in filmmaking when you have Douglas Trumbull as your best friend, who's making things that Hollywood's never had, or you've got George Lucas, who has because he's structured one deal really well, has an infinite supply of money to be able to make and do new stuff that no one's ever seen before. But the problem is how do you take that technical creativity and meld it with the art and or commerce? But the other issue too is I may make an AI version of a Harry Potter that I watch, but a lot of the value we as people in a culture and society derive out of something like Harry Potter is it gives us a commonality.
Yeah.
And if the version I see is different than the version you see versus Jerry sees or RMCs, when he catches up, if they're all different, then we totally lose that commonality, and that becomes a wash and kind of a quirky, weird thing.
The commonality will be the whatever the opposite of the long tail. There's going to be a few creators who create this amazing virtual world that everybody's going to be participating in, and so we'll still have that commonality someplace. It won't be called a movie anymore. It'll be called a game, but
I mean, and you can imagine influencers. To some extent, like influencers have become, like YouTube influencers, for example. They have become like the new like channels, right? I mean, the literary channels, what they have.
Yeah.
But they are channels in the sense of like people tune to them, and like they can provide that, that commonality. So you can imagine a lot of influencers from YouTube making the jump into like curating, right, and producing derivative work that has that aspect, like you say, Peter. Yeah.
But the issue though is it happens over time. So in the 14 and 1500s, the common denominator everyone had was stories from the Bible, because you see them and hear them every week, and then eventually you have the plays of Shakespeare, and that becomes the common theme that's repeated over and over. Or 2 weeks ago I read something that mentioned caves and shadows on a wall, and immediately I think Plato. Maybe not everyone does, but without that commonality underlying the thing, or let's say you're watching The Simpsons, when you don't have the background of the 800 movies that they reference as a common grammar, if you're an influencer, how do you actually influence when you don't have those shorthand tidbits for people to grab onto, when it's just all mishmash?
Right. Yeah, the cultural background is relevant, yes.
The influencers themselves will be curating things that will end up being that lingua franca for people.
Right, and that happens now, right? Like communities around influencers develop their own memes, for example, usually, and like terminology and so on, that they can be quite impenetrable, of course, to like other people, I guess, or people not in the community. It goes back to some extent like a collection of shibboleths, no, or like shibboleths, how do you pronounce that? This like one of the reasons why memes develop, I guess, or like common lingo and so on, can be this in-group signaling. All these dynamics probably will remain. But it's true that that's still happening within a common context, a common cultural context, and it could be that AI results in a much more hybridized, or like a sort of like an explosion of context, in the sense that to some extent, like similar to the filter bubble effect, no? Maybe.
The AI will also help tell you what. So even now you can go to a website that says, here's what that meme meant. You see some image and you go, oh, this is a meme, but I'm not clueful enough to know what it is. So you go to whatever meme website and you say, okay, I don't get the joke. Tell me what the joke is. So AI is going to do that more and more. So you'll be able to transport yourself into a collection of people, a culture, by just asking the bot, let me in on the joke.
But you already have that thing in reading contexts, where you're reading and you run into a word you don't know. And even though it's super easy on your Kindle to press the button and pull up the dictionary, as a practicality, almost no one does that, even though it's immediately available now, even compared to 15 years ago when you had to go to the bookshelf, pull the book off, pull the dictionary off, look up the damn thing, and then see it. And then now you got to go back into the world of what the hell you were reading.
I think it's a good observation, and I think a bunch of people don't care to participate in they don't even probably notice. They don't know or care that, hey, there's another culture adjacent to you that you might love, or you might at least want to know about, or something like that. But then there are also people who know that Urban Dictionary exists and know to look up
Yeah.
a word or a joke or something like that, and be in on it.
Well, or the things that are the in jokes that you're not going to see or know are so subtle. So, as an example, I've got a t-shirt with a phone on it that says extension 765, which is such an obscure movie reference. Walking around, even in Los Angeles, I have yet to run into someone who has seen it and says, "I know what that's a reference to."
No, I don't actually. Can you?
And it's so there is between Godfathers, Francis Ford Coppola made a movie called The Conversation,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
Gene
Hackman.
Hackman
Yeah.
essentially as a high-end audio engineer recording people for essentially a CIA-like operation.
Yeah.
And there's a short snippet scene where an almost unknown Harrison Ford at the time picks up the phone and says extension 765 is how he answers the phone. But it has to do with like the surveillance state we all live in now. And I think it's an interesting, my other favorite interesting tidbit, there's a Gene Hackman, Will Smith movie from the early 2000s, Enemy of the State. It's almost like a follow-on perfect double feature to watch The Conversation and then, Enemy of the State, because it's the same character playing. It's almost like he's playing the same character, like 40 years later, 30 years later,
Interesting. I
doing
didn't
the
know
same
that.
exact wrong things.
Thank you. I have seen the conversation, but not the other one. I was grabbed by the fact that you said like double feature, and that's it brings me back to what we're discussing about the mashups, right? Because double features being like something that a way in which anybody can engage with cinema since long ago in a creative way, which is choose two movies and make a pair, right? So I guess what we were discussing is more like choose two movies and make this pair and just splice it, right? Instead of like watching them sequentially. So to some extent, the same the double feature is also a mashup. I guess I'm trying to say. Yeah. And welcome, Adam.
Hello.
Hey, long time.
Yeah,
I have a
we've missed each other in the last few.
Yeah.
I have a complete non sequitur. I'm part of AI Salon, and they're starting to track legislation. So if you know people in California, they might want to consider signing these letters. They've done that. They did one previously in Colorado, and one of the organizers of AI Salon is testifying before a joint session of Congress soon with 10 or so other AI entrepreneurs. So it's interesting seeing that develop.
Cool. Yes, I wasn't aware at all of the situation in California around the eye. Two proposals.
I am not super familiar with it either, but what's happening is it's easy to convince a lawmaker to say, well, we should regulate AI more, and then the incumbents benefit from that because if you stop AI research and AI innovation, then the people who are going to suffer are the little guys, not the big guys.
Yeah, and it's a ladder pool.
And the big guys are the ones who have the money to lobby and write the laws that benefit themselves. So eventually it would be nice to see a political climate that swings more towards, helping out the little guy. You don't need to totally destroy innovation and the creativity piece that may fuel the bigger companies, but at least you can kind of level the playing field.
Yeah.
What's that kind of system called? It's not quite plutocracy, and it's not quite late stage capitalism, but when you have, when the big guys get to write the rules, what's that called?
Or maybe oligarchy, which is roughly what we've got.
Yeah.
where that seems to kind of more closely fit what we've got going on.
There must be a word for the runaway like feedback effect. You know, the big guys can make the rules, then they make rules that favor the big guys, and so the big guys get better and bigger, and it keeps going.
Maybe we're back to capitalism then. Just like
Well, except it doesn't even have to be capitalism
yeah,
necessarily,
true.
right?
No,
It
no,
can just
actually,
be
the hierarchy.
capitalism
Yeah.
is, yeah.
I don't know when he said it, but I just posted a little quote I found from Adriano Olivetti, who it surely had to have been probably the late 50s, early 60s when he's running the Olivetti typewriter factory in Italy. And then eventually they had factories, I think, in Spain and maybe Holland, possibly later. But he kind of balances out the way he talks about it in a post-World War II Italy moving towards democracy kind of perspective of how do you balance the value of the factory versus the value of the people who work in the factory. And it's interesting to see that in like what's probably the early 60s in his philosophy versus what we see now as the factory is the end all be all. It's, you know, it's Jeff Bezos and it's Amazon, and who gives a shit about the tiny little guy? Nobody cares unless you're the tiny little guy. But you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
now
it's
where
Elon Musk.
you know,
Yeah.
I should throw in Jerry's, you know, link to capitalism being the cuckoo,
Yeah.
so we can all have our drink. Sorry to interrupt you, Flancy.
No. You didn't interrupt. No. Thank you. And hi to Jerry, who is probably watching the recording. See you next time. So yeah, Olivetti is. I knew that he was quite progressive for like industrial magnet, I guess. And it's a nice quote. Thank you. I put it in the notes.
Well, and that's at a time too that he's saying it where the US typewriter manufacturing has gone cheap and crappy. In Italy and Germany are now dominating that space because they're better at manufacturing and doing really like high quality stuff. So the typewriters of the 60s and early 70s are way better when they're coming from Germany and Italy than they are from the US.
Mhm.
And then by the early 80s, they're crap everywhere. But it's Japan that's making them or subsumes all the business from everywhere. And then, you know, another decade on, it's, I think the only factory that still makes them is in China. And they're just the worst pieces of plastic crap on the planet.
Different niche.
Yeah, it started shopping for dishwashers recently, and you know, we have a 22-year-old dishwasher that stopped working, and so, you know, I'm like, well, in 20 years things must be better, right? My wife is like, this dishwasher works great. I just want one like this. And it's like you go and you look, and they're like, the reliability is terrible. The features, they still leak. They still, you know. So any one that you go look at, the reviews are like mixed, and it's that weird thing where
Yeah, but you know, planned obsolescence is not only a thing, but it's also, I mean, it's way cheaper to go buy a brand new one when the one you bought a year ago is dead than to replace it.
Yeah.
But it's, if you have one from 30 years ago, it may not be the most efficient thing on the planet, but it's probably cheaper both in the near term and the long term to spend a couple bucks to fix the thing you had 20 years ago. But you know, it is insane. You can go out and buy a solid 1950s US typewriter that works as well today as it did then, and it will work for the next century. You know, as long as you take half reasonable care of it, they, you know, the things just don't die. And if you have to replace something, it's, you know, they're all solid steel. even at that point too. So, the things will last forever. As long as you got ribbon, you're in good shape.
Right.
And even that you could make yourself in, your garage if you needed to.
But then you still don't have backspace. For me, it's
Oh
like
no. Oh, by the 1950s, they all had backspace keys.
but they don't delete.
Well,
True.
I just cleaned out I think it was a 1958 Smith and Corona Skyrider, and it was half filled inside with eraser shavings, and literally added almost a half a pound to the machine because it had a bottom on it. So I literally took it out and dumped it out, and it lost a half a pound just in eraser shavings. So you could erase and then retype. So that was a thing.
Did the typewriter erase, or did you have to?
That particular one did not. It wasn't until like the late 60s that they started selling ribbon that had like
Correction tape.
whiteout imprinted on it that you could erase characters.
Oh,
But even then, the problem becomes as you're hitting it with the type slugs, the chips of the stuff come off and gunk up the inside of your typewriter. So you need to clean it out way more often.
Yeah.
You don't want to clean it. Those are nasty.
The trick is just not to make mistakes when you type.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you make mistakes, but you're doing it as part of a creative process where you're always going to be penciling in and doing the thing. And then when your final product is ready, you take it to a professional printer or publisher, and then you put it out.
Right.
You don't need. I very rarely. When I was a kid, I used to erase and fix stuff all the time. I almost never do it now in actual practice. Never. Just strike it out, move on.
Strikeout is good too.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of times I don't even bother to go back and strike it out. I'll just do it by hand in the manual edits after. So.
I wanted to go shortly back to the Google form that you pasted, Peter, because I took a look, and so it's fascinating because it makes sense. It's still the kind of thing I will do, which is start a Google form to gather like support. But I'm surprised. Isn't it a bit weird that we don't have something better, like for like government issues like this? Even in the US, I actually don't know if of any other country that does better. But essentially, when there are proposals, you will think that having a digital system that lets people oppose the proposal or even support the proposal, because one of the limitations of this one you share is that it is strictly to oppose this, right? But I would like to also see the people who support these proposals.
Yeah.
And all this is like somehow not solved. Oh, Adam has something. Oh, someone told me about Hope recently.
Yeah, I was just out. It was just this weekend. It's the first time I've ever been. It's not. I agree. It would be better if you could do, like if you had a definite concept of who's supporting and who's opposing, right? But all you can really see is like maybe lobbyist groups giving to politicians and make some assumptions, depending on how narrow they are. But very few of them are not that narrow. But in terms of like being like, oh, support or oppose, so a really interesting presentation about this technology that's being used in some places. Let me see if I can hunt down my notes. I haven't cleaned them up yet, so.
No, thank you.
Polis, Polis, at www.poll.is.
Oh.
Apparently, this was like really heavily used in some democratic systems. I think their big thing that they noted was Slovakia apparently used it really heavily. UK Policy Lab is using it, and apparently it was used by the Taiwanese, like the Taiwanese government is using it.
Oh, this is so cool. And the project is called the Computational Democracy Project. Yeah, exactly. Basically.
Yeah, they call it computational democracy work.
Yeah. And Polis, of course, well, I immediately like it as it's in same as Agora space semantically, no? The Polis.
Yeah, I think that like the computational democracy project runs Polis.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, they're in the same space. Yeah, it was very impressive.
It looks.
Too bad it's not even more broadly used.
Yeah, but we can fix that with time.
I want to say this sounds a lot like something Jerry mentioned almost a year ago, and I can't remember the name of the project. He certainly would throw it right out. But there's also
they've been around for a while.
Yeah, or maybe he did, and it's the same one because it sounds very familiar. The tough part is you may have like the wisdom of the crowds helps push you in one direction, and you need some kind of ratchet mechanism to aggregate those changes over time so that you don't slip back. But then you also have the opposite issue of kind of a cult of personality that happens with somebody like Trump, who can take what seems like good ideas and run a country into a dramatically different direction.
Yeah, but then again, our current system does nothing to prevent that either.
Well, I think the tough part is you have issues like gerrymandering, where when one group who shouldn't be in control as the minority is driving the decisions in the wrong direction, which I think is roughly what's happening in America now, is there's a minority opinion is driving the direction of where people are headed. And even while they're becoming a more minority, on a daily basis. So the question is, if you do that kind of, maybe not even algorithmic, but computational direction setting, which one's the right one and how does that work?
Yeah.
Or work well?
I think, these are all real problems. I guess I'm just excited by the fact of that some people are trying to develop these new tools, because sometimes I feel like, and this is where I really appreciate you sharing this back, Adam, because like I see so often it seems like situations in which I'm like, if only there was a default way of like finding where the discussions, like for requests for improvements on this topic, how to join the discussion for in governance. If only it was simpler, more people will do it, and therefore, right, there will be more people solving these problems. I guess it's naive, but always. And I was seeing how apparently this Go0v, it says like for many government agencies in Taiwan, which have URLs ending with .gov.tw, you can replace the gov with G0v, and it will direct the user to a so-called shadow government. Cool. So
we're having so many fun side discussions off to the side. It's become quiet.
I am like
somebody dragged one of them into the center.
Yeah, I'm transporting some of the notes.
people in in the AI salon kind of make fun of Moshi, but I mean, it's they say it's weird. I haven't tried it yet, or it failed to work on my phone, right? But
I haven't heard
it's
of it.
interesting to test out because it's low latency voice conversation.
Oh, voice conversation.
Yeah,
Oh, cool. Okay, interesting.
and I don't think it's text at all. I think it's straight. It thinks in conversation audio.
Interesting. Conversations are limited to 5 minutes.
Interesting.
5 minutes is a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
We're using this one because it's easier to embed. That's right. It's like Evolix. So we're using Evolix.
So, well, we ended up here. I mean, it's a combination of things. We were using Meet Jitsi because it was very easy to join. It's anonymous and so on. And then it got shut down. I mean, for anonymous traffic, and we moved to this one, and it's open source.
Is mainstream Jitsi not working anymore?
Well, it is, but they force the person creating the meeting at least to log in. So it just adds some friction.
All right, I'm just wondering. So something happened since the last time we used this, and now it can't read my camera for some reason.
Oh, that explains why we're not seeing you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually really weird because it's not just that it can't read my camera. Like, I can't even select camera options. My browser has allowed it to use the camera. I'm in Firefox, which presumably is pretty normal. Yeah. But when I try and use the camera, it says your camera does not satisfy some of the required constraints. Very strange.
It is strange.
Okay.
Yeah, we can definitely move somewhere else, in particular, for next time. But so, where do you think we could move?
I have no particular opinion. I mean, I feel like, so whoever's hosting needs to log in. So I guess it's sort of difficult to do it where whoever's around runs the room, right, in mainstream Jitsi. We can stay here. I'll see if I can figure it out on my side. Maybe I'll work in a different browser or something.
Maybe I'm using Chromium more as of late, but I can try with Firefox after this to see if I have a similar issue because sometimes they are relations. Yes. And I'm happy to I mean, I would like to ideally keep. I mean, I like the open source aspect of this, but I don't like Zoom. So I'm like, but I don't want to be like via blocker there. We can move to like something like this. But if we're going to do like a closed source, I would personally prefer to use Google Meet. But then, there's like a whole side thread there because recording in Meet is sort of like, I don't have it on my account, etc. And the other open source I know is Big Blue Button, which is definitely, in my opinion, worse than Jitsi.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we don't have to change or anything. I was just curious how easy it would be, but it sounds like not.
No, but
I'll fiddle on my side with a different browser or something.
Yeah, and maybe a different Jitsi instance maybe even work depending on the software. I'm happy to look into it.
How about Signal or Telegram or something like that? How are those doing nowadays?
I don't think you can do video.
Yeah. They do peer to like point to peer, two people.
Yeah.
I guess a group is hard. Yeah.
Yeah, multi-way is just like a lot harder. Yeah, usually have a server component. I mean, they could fix it. They could solve it, but they don't. No.
Yeah.
I mean, what's subject? So I wanted to ask, like, if you want, I don't know if people ask you this a lot, Adam, but how are you doing with all the craziness in the US and that's happening, in particular because
Oh no! I mean, the craziness has been ongoing, right? Like, I think it's not like there's a new crazy thing that's happening, but it's not like. I feel like weirdly the US is like at maximum craziness. And so the fact that like someone tried to shoot Trump is like almost incidental, right? Like I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but like I keep it. I pay attention to like our home pages, right? Like our homepage, the post, the New York Times post homepage, and one of the things that I thought was really weird. I guess not weird, just sort of interesting in terms of our overall craziness, right? Is that it resolved very quickly, right? This happened on a weekend, and so like they found the guy. We've identified that he's maybe a Republican, probably a Republican, and then like the reporting on it died out really quickly. Like I know there's some degree of personalization to the Times homepage, probably, but I'm on the New York Times homepage, and like it's not above the fold. It's not in the first scroll. It's not in the second scroll. You have to scroll like 2 to 3 times to see their Trump rally shooting unit. And on the post, it's definitely not above the fold. And there too, it's the third unit down, so 2 to 3 scrolls probably to get to it. And what's really interesting is not just that, but like that was true yesterday too. So yesterday it was in our second position on the post, but it was already on the Times third position. And I think like obviously if he got killed, it would be a different story. But I think the fact that someone took a shot at him, like, is the least weird thing about the election right now, right? Like, presidents getting shot at is like normal compared to U.S. politics right now, and so it feels like I don't know, like there's so much there's still reporting happening on it, like it's so little compared to everything else that's going on. Like, just J.D. Vance being selected for VP already overshadows it almost entirely. Like, people from outside the U.S., because I met up with some folks who were staying past the time from Hope and talked to them. And he's like, oh, yeah, what a big deal, all that. And I was like, oh, yeah, that he got shot. I was talking to someone else internationally yesterday, who was like, how are you doing? And I was like, oh, it's COVID, feeling sick. And he's like, no, I mean with like Trump getting shot. It was like, oh yeah, it totally exited my brain already. Like so much shit has already happened since then, right?
Well, it's almost too like the old Trump days during his administration when there's so much crazy going on a daily basis, you can't keep up with half of it. And
Right.
The last, it's even worse because I went on a vacation for 2 weeks and then I came back, and then like all these big things have happened in the week and a half since I got back. It's like, I'm ready to disconnect again.
Yeah. I think that's the weirdest thing about it, is that it feels like it's like, even for someone like me who's reading all the time, right? Reading news all the time. I am absolutely a Twitter addict, etc. But like, even for me, it feels like it's just like going too fast. I don't know. It's just wild, right? Like if you look on Twitter, I don't even think it's trending anymore. Like my timeline is barely talking about it. Same with Blue Sky. Same with Mastodon. Honestly, I saw more over the weekend about Firefox and the stuff that people are upset about there on Mastodon than I did about Trump being shot. I don't know.
This means his plan is working. He has so normalized the level of crazy around who he is and what he's doing that the fact that somebody took a shot at him, nicked him, and he could have died, like, we've checked out. We don't care. Literally,
Yeah.
his plan has reached like fruition.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I think it's like a lot of things, right? Like just everything that's happened, right? Whereas there's a COVID spike again. We're in a huge heat wave. Uh, there's so much stuff going on. So and it's
Dog
not
and
even
cats
just Trump
living
related.
together.
Yeah. Right, like 3 major celebrities died over the week. I keep forgetting over the weekend. I keep forgetting all of them. It's Dr. Ruth, Shannon Doherty, and one other person.
Oh, Richard Simmons.
Right, Richard Simmons.
And
right?
Shelley Duvall, so it went in 4.
Oh, right, Shelley Duvall 4. Right, like normally that would be like news for a week. Right, we'd be talking about those 4 people for a week, and like. Dr. Ruth is still on our homepage, and so is Shannon Doherty. But Shelley Duvall and Simmons have already entirely fallen off the Times homepage. Or sorry, that's the Times homepage. I think all of them have fallen off of the Washington Post's page. And like even our social like things where it's just like clearly people have already moved their attention because our metrics that build like the most popular units also have dropped them.
Right.
I don't know.
So do you think that this may be an acceleration process that goes beyond the US poll, essentially niche, and it just has to do with how the attention gets is in this feedback loop in its patterns with like the algorithms?
Yeah, I think it is like really relevant to what we're trying to do. I actually have I really want to release my timeline, but I keep having this bug that causes it to not build every second time I run it, and I haven't hunted it down yet. I don't want to merge it yet.
Run it twice at a
like,
time.
Yeah, but like I'm putting together the timeline on just COVID, and like it's wild to me like how much shit has happened and like how it's like so much of it has already passed out of memory. You know, I was talking to one of the presentations at Hope was about like how they built a mesh network for their community. And it was a whole thing about like what can you do with your COVID stimulus check, right? And basically a group of people decided they were going to bring their COVID stimulus checks together and not only like basically pay for someone to work full time and for the equipment of putting together a mesh network for their community. Like a mesh internet access for their community, like what Mesh New York and Mesh PA do. Which is very cool, but like I realized I had entirely forgotten that was a thing, right? Like that was really not that long ago. But like we forget, but like you think about it and they went through some of the stuff that I had missed at the time even. And it's wild to think about like really like housing security and a universal basic income for like 2 years. It happened. And like people accomplished so many amazing things with that behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And we just sort of forgot that A, it happened, and B, like that what happened was intrinsic to the conditions of having those things. Right? Like imagine what we could do if like you were guaranteed that you could not be evicted and that your rent could not be raised ludicrously and that you could depend on having at least what was it 1,400 like across 2 months, which is really quite little, but like still I don't know, it just feels like history is slipping out of our hands so quickly, you know.
Yeah. See you, Chris.
See you guys.
This one.
Send me that link for the recording.
Yeah. I will try to remember to actually stop the recording and so quitting. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. See you guys next week.
So yeah. I mean, I completely agree, Adam. It will be so it is so valuable. I mean, and this is, I will file it under in two directions. I guess I think we'll go. One is like how to extract not so time dependent and like short lived information from timelines, because we are like timeline, always pushing the last, right? And anything else just falls through the crack. Like there's like a lot of social media and so on. Like it's all about like that feed, updating that
Yeah.
feed. But then once I'm the same about like how newspapers have become and so on, like you say. But a lot of that information is actually evergreen to some extent, or at least it will be relevant in further context, not strictly time dependent, right? So
Yeah.
they think about like when you're researching COVID, you are interested apparently in all the tweets about COVID, not the latest ones only, right? And yet, that area is underexplored, I think, with the collapse of, I guess, the more open internet and so on before. And the other is like this thing you're saying about, like what people were able to achieve with like some glimpse of basic income and so on in the US. I mean, it reminds me of like the fact that COVID was like this. You could see it as this international experiment because every country did different things, and like some things work better than others, right? To some extent. And then I don't know. Like I keep waiting for someone to say like, okay, let's sit down as an international community and say, let's review all the things we tried and agree which things work better than others. So then for the next time, we can agree at least what was the approximate ranking of like how well we did or something, if you want to like
Yeah.
put in those terms. And I don't see, I mean, I hope that's happening on, in institutions and so on, like, but I don't see it in the discourse. I don't see
Yeah, I'm not even
the
sure it's
UN
happening
stepping
in-
up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it's happening in institutions, to be honest. Right? You look at like the media industry and they keep trying to do the same thing over and over, and other places keep trying to do the same thing over and over, and it keeps not working, and nobody seems to learn. Like, I think even Cory Doctorow gave a great talk at Hope. It was recorded, so it should be up soon. But one of the things he
Nice.
noted was like that tech companies, in order to protect them, they used to have input from engineers who had job security and could object, right? But one of the reasons they don't anymore is one, it's much harder to get a job in engineering than it used to be if you have the skills because there's many more people. But also, like, they fired a lot of people. And, like, institutional memory is gone because, like, the idea that you would work at one place for 50 years, much less 20 years, is basically dead. And the institutions haven't figured out good processes to replace that problem. I would love to talk about this more, but I have to drop, I'm afraid. I'm running a meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense. Next time then.
Bye.
And I also
Yeah.
like should probably go home. Yeah.
Thanks, Lancian. I should go too.
Yeah. Thank you. And I will now finish the recording. Thank you. Have a nice
Take
one.
care.
Yeah.